I'll just give you a flavor for what to expect, which is, you have to provide a copy of the lease agreement. The tenant has to provide a copy of the lease agreement, a copy, state issued ID or driver's license, official letter from third party showing name and address, such as a utility bill or some other thing verifying that the tenant does live at that address, government issued library card or utility statements. In other words, those are all the things that the tenant must submit.
Okay.
The owner has to submit a property deed, mortgage notes, property tax forms, homeowners insurance, and then in addition, you have to have a rent, like I say, a copy of the lease, rent ledger showing how much the rent was, how much rent is owing. So that gives you some idea of how many documents they're requiring to verify this, because you can imagine that there's a lot of people, they see the government's giving out free money, they're fraudulently trying to get some of the money. I'm sure some of the money is going into bad people right now anyway. It's for the honest landlord and the honest tenant that want to take advantage of this program to get the 100% rent.
Why?
You're going to have to give a lot of documents. You're going to have to wait for 2 or 3 months. Everyone that I talk to tells me that the people there are not answering the phone. It takes them several days to a week to answer an email, and it's going to take 2 to 3 months before you get the actual payment. The website, like I said, I've never used the website, but the website is cumbersome, not terribly well designed, but it is housingiskey.com. And here's what I tell people. Yes, it's cumbersome. Yes, it takes a long time. Apply for it anyway. There's no cost to apply for the rental assistance, so why not apply for this? All it takes is maybe 1 hour, maybe 2 hours of your time, then 5 minutes once or twice a week to follow up on the application. That costs you $0 to make the application for the rental assistance, so why not apply for the rental assistance? And it's something that goes both ways. Why would the landlord not apply? Why would the tenant not apply? It's absolutely common sense. Get the free money, get the rent paid. When the rent is paid by the Housing is Key, the California Department of Housing, the tenant no longer owes the rent. So the tenant has a strong incentive to get this done. When the rent is paid, the landlord gets the money. So both the landlord and the tenant have a strong incentive to make this happen. I can tell you, though, I have many situations in which the landlord and tenant are in a hostile relationship and they're not doing it. It's really unfortunate. So my advice to people is, get beyond the acrimony and work together and get that rental assistance going.
It helps out both parties. It helps a tenant be able to stay in the property, and it helps the landlord collect all those missed payments of rent. And then it doesn't make it so that the tenant owes all this money after the fact, and it's basically forgiven, which is just a great program. But I think you're right, Brian. I think that this issue or this situation has caused a lot of hostility between certain tenants and certain landlords. And I know a lot of tenants and landlords at one point they had a great relationship and now are not even on speaking terms whatsoever.
Yes. Yeah. And it gets to the whole issue of the character of the tenant. I mean, there are some tenants that just for some reason they don't want to apply because they don't want the landlord to benefit, and I don't know. And there might be some landlords that are just bad people too. I mean, it goes both ways, I'm sure. But my advice to everyone is, get the free money, cooperate, and be reasonable, and then on October 1st you can make a decision. I mean, if the landlord and tenant show that they're both good people, then and the rent gets mostly taken care of, then on October 1st, maybe you can go forward and continue with a good landlord-tenant relationship, which I think is in everyone's best interest. If on October 1st the tenant's just saying, screw you, landlord, I don't even feel like applying for the free money, well, then you have a really good idea of what kind of tenant that is, and you can take action appropriately.
At that point. So the understanding is that once once the eviction moratorium on September 30th ends, they could extend it again, or things can go back to normal. Those are basically the two options that have happened. It's already been extended a couple of times.